The Plum-Rain Scroll by Ruth Manley, book review. This is a book that I came across because it was being passed around my office. Coworker gave it to a student read it and brought it back, gave it to me. A number of people around the office had already read it, and all had good things to say about it. So because this book was being so highly praised by my coworkers and students, I decided to read it myself before giving it back. I no longer have the copy of the book with me, unfortunately, but you can Google it, take a look at the cover. The cover it looks very intriguing. It's one of those covers, the cover art is particularly well done. It seems to promise a wonderful world of fantasy and escapism. It's a children's book. It was written by Australian author Ruth Manley. And it's using characters from Japanese mythology. It's an original tale, so it's not a retelling of any one particular Japanese myth, but it's using characters that are common to Japanese mythology. The book is marketed as educational, like introducing Western children to Japanese mythology by means of an original story. By way of analogy, maybe you could say this is kind of like what Tolkien did to Norse mythology. Or maybe that's comparing apples and oranges, since this is a children's book and Lord of the Rings was more pitched toward an older audience. I don't know. Anyways, this book was originally published way back in 1978, which makes you wonder, actually. After anime has become so popular with children internationally, maybe some of these characters no longer need as much of an introduction. Or I don't know, maybe they do. At any rate, somebody must have thought that this book was due a republishing, because the edition I have was republished in 2005, or the edition I read. The hero of the book, of the story, is an odd job boy named Taro. Now, if you are familiar with Japanese stories, or if you've lived in Japan for any length of time, you're probably familiar with Momotaro, or Peach Taro, to translate it literally into English. It's a famous Japanese story. It comes up all the time in Japanese elementary schools, or Japanese folktale collections, about a boy named Taro who travels and gradually accumulates more and more companions as he goes. This story is very similar. It's not Momotaro, but this particular Taro does go on a journey, and he also acquires various friends along the way. By the time he's done, in his little band includes almost every creature popular in Japanese mythology. There's a ghost, an oni, which is kind of like a demon or like a troll maybe, a dream eater, a half kappa, half roof watcher creature, a Lord 8,000 spears, etc. The style of the book is very simple. It's a very simplistic narrative. Now, fair enough, this is a children's book, but after reading books like Harry Potter and the Golden Compass, which are also children's books, which have a very adult feel to them, or at least don't feel like they're talking down to you, this book does feel like it's talking down to you, or at least I thought it so. It seemed like it was just written in a very overly simplistic style. Or if I was inclined to be cranky, I would say maybe that children's literature is the most undemanding for writers of limited talent. Sorry. Let me just quote a passage from this book, and maybe you can make up your own mind as to the prose. So, this is going to jump right into the middle of the scene, but I guess pay attention to the prose to get a feel for it. "One step onto my bridge," he roared, "and I shall eat you all for my bedtime snack. I am Suki the Terrible. Behold me and tremble." "Why should we?" demanded Taro scornfully. We've had the better of far more frightening Onis than you could ever hope to be." He sounded far braver than he felt. "You won't be so carefree when you're side dishes to my evening rice," retorted Oni, fingering his club lovingly. "How fine I shall look in that handsome red robe. And that dog's skin will make me a nice cozy little foot rug for the time of greatest cold." At this, Obero stamped her foot. "You couldn't look fine in anything," she stormed. "If you so much as lay a finger on my dog, I warn you, you'll be sorrier than you've ever been in your whole life." To her astonishment and that of her friends, a tear appeared and slowly coursed down the blue cheek of the Oni. "Oh, please don't say that," he implored her. "If you knew the trouble I take to look nice. I was carefully brought up, even if I am an orphan now. I never forget the things that Mother taught my sister and me. One of her sayings was, 'A nice little Oni is always neat.' She impressed it upon us that Onis who go about in tiger-skin line clothes are undesirable acquaintances. I should never dream of so demeaning myself. And yet you say that for all my efforts to uphold Mother's standards, I don't look nice in my fine clothes? And you threaten to set your dog on me?" "Well, it's your own fault," Obero pointed out, though she was much mollified by his tears. "What do you expect people to say when you're so horrid to them? Actually, your clothes are quite attractive. But you see, we simply must cross this bridge, and cross it we mean to. My dog is very fierce. If I give her the word... my dog is very fierce if I give her the word. So don't imagine you're going to catch and eat any of us, as you no doubt did to the man from whom you got that outfit." End quote. Okay, so it's not terrible. The author knows some advanced vocabulary and uses it eloquently, but nobody talks like that in real life. People only talk like that in children's books. And aside from which, the characterizations are very juvenile here. Now, the charitable explanation is that this is supposed to be a modern-day fairy tale or a retelling of Japanese fairy tales. So the author is intentionally going for a fairy tale tone and kind of fairy tale characters with fairy tale interactions. It's not without its charm if you go along with it. If you just kind of put aside that part of your brain that says, right, nobody talks like that in real life. If you just switch that off and say to yourself, I'm reading a fairy tale, then it can be kind of fun, but just be forewarned about that before going into the book. Now, not only is this book filled with Japanese mythical creatures, it's also filled with Japanese vocabulary. I guess this is another part of how it's supposed to be educational. So there are lots of Japanese words for everyday items and for cultural references. I think some of them are a little bit dated, words for stuff from old Japan. So for example, there's andon, pedestal lamp, daimyo, feudal lord, gagaku, which means court music, geita, which means wooden clogs. I was actually learning Japanese at the time I read this book. I was living in Japan. But, a lot of these, like a pedestal lamp or wooden clogs, actually don't come up terribly often in modern day life. So a lot of this was new to me despite living in Japan. Now, at the time I was trying my best to study Japanese culture and language. So in theory, this kind of thing is great for me. It's just what I need. In practice, though, I do have to admit I got slightly annoyed by having to go back to the glossary to look up all these words. They're all defined in the glossary. They're not defined in the text. So the book never says, he put on his geita, which was a type of wooden clogs. It just says, he put on his geita, and then you're like, oh, all right, what's a geita? And then you have to go back to the glossary to look it up. It's one of those books that yeah, it makes you work a little bit for it. Now, this is me as an adult complaining about this. Keep in mind this is a children's book. So how is a child going to react to constantly being sent back to the glossary? Well, I don't know. Maybe they won't complain about it because they wouldn't know any better. But it just, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's very child-friendly. The first 15 pages are the worst. So this is right when we're getting introduced to the main character, Taro, and it's kind of saying, okay, this is Taro, and is setting the scene, and is talking about everything around Taro's room and in Taro's house, and it's filled with Japanese names for objects. Once you get past the first 15 pages, then it's actually not so bad. Then the density of new Japanese words decreases. But, you know, I thought the first 15 pages is when the author should be trying their best to hook you. The first 15 pages is not when the author should be sending you to the glossary 5 times in one page. Like, hook the reader first on the intriguing story, and then maybe once you've got them hooked, then you can slowly build in the new words, or I don't know, dump all the new words in at once, or whatever you want to do. But the point is, hook the reader first. That would have been my advice to the publisher had I been asked about this book. Had I been, I mean, I was just a baby in 1978, but yeah, you know what I mean. Anyways, yeah, I guess it's safe to say that I like this book well enough. I didn't love it. But if you're interested in Japanese mythology, yeah, give it a go. It's an easy enough read.